basically give my opinions about House of the Dragon versus
Oh, okay.
Rings of Power. Bree, no worries. Yeah, don't watch. Yeah, don't watch it if you want. Don't want spoilers. So yeah, have a good night. Have you watched any of them, man? House of the Dragon or Rings of Power?
I have not. I fell asleep watching the first one, but that was because I was tired and I
Which
just haven't got back to it.
House of the Dragon or Rings of Power? Which one?
House of the Dragons.
Okay, okay. Well, okay. Yeah. This podcast this week is just me, basic, because Deji can't come and none of the other guys were able to make it, so I figured this will be like my opportunity to just speak my thoughts about the two series. But yeah, I can see you on. I'll check you out on Warzone later. I'll come on after that, after this pod. Cool. Oh, I can't hear you, man. I don't know what happened to the audio.
Oh, wait. Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, I'll check you on Warzone later. I don't want to give you any spoilers
Yep.
for the shows. All right, man.
Word up.
Peace. All right, guys. So sorry about that. And so Rings of Power, you could already see just from like the images here, the way they kind of just maybe they color graded. I also noticed too. I'm a photographer, videographer, and I think, to my knowledge, they shoot this in 24p or like 24 frames a second. It's more cinematic for me when I watch this show. It looks like you're watching a movie. Like every episode looks like its own movie. The casting, I think, was like, you don't know any of these. You know, there's a couple actors that you may have recognized from other things, but for the most part, they're all like kind of new actors. But the choices have been great. Acting has been really good. It's believable. That's the main thing. Already we've reached episode 5 or 6 now, and they changed this title character. This one, she's like huge, I think, and I mean she's gonna remain a huge character in this show, but unfortunately she's grown up, and it's weird because we've already, as a viewer, I've already grown attached to this character with like this identity, I guess, this actress. But of course they're getting older, so then she has now been replaced with this woman. She has definitely her own kind of strength. Actually, this is a decent resemblance if you can look at it. They did pretty good here, I'd say. Her nose is definitely bigger. But I'd say they did pretty good in terms of casting, but the strength came very different as soon as they kind of revealed this new character in her. If you watch the episode, we get introduced to her in labor, so it's already she just seems very more like emotive, expressive, and whereas she was always so like calm, reserved, and cool, and like brooding almost, like she was in like a darker state, whereas the older version of her, she kind of comes off more like vulnerable, like there's more vulnerability in her, or maybe there's a weakness. Oh, why does this keep... Huh. In any case, been a huge fan of the way they've like I said, the costumes, the detail in the show is all believable to me. Even the interactions, even the language, whatever Valyrian, when they speak Valyrian, it like the interaction back and forth seems very natural. Okay, it's only so much I can say when I'm a fan of something. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. Go start it. Start at least the first episode. If definitely if you were a fan of Game of Thrones, I think it does it justice. And where it's going so far, one thing I've noticed is just like it doesn't feel like it's just trying to replace what Game of Thrones was, where you would pick on like a new character that's definitely supposed to like what's the word, like mirror someone else from Game of Thrones. Like you wouldn't take like Ned from or Ned Stark from Game of Thrones and think like who's he who's he supposed to be represented by in this new show, and you'd think maybe it's the king. I don't think so. Like I definitely don't see that they're just trying to like take the same mold of the Game of Thrones show and then like bring it to you know, new faces, new characters, but like a same kind of feeling. So I do appreciate that about the show, the fact that it's not just like a copy and paste with like new actors and actresses. Now let's go to let's start with Rings of Power, just so you guys can images. Okay, so I'm doing it this way where you can just see kind of the images of the show to get like a feeling of, I mean, I guess how what is it, like how the show is portrayed while you're watching it. This seems very serious, like a serious drama series. It's darker, and it's the tone is a little bit, even actually even when you look at this scene and this scene, I guess it's the color grading. Yeah, it is more of like a flat, like toned down. Nothing's too vibrant. That's definitely, when you look at these scenes, vibrancy isn't a word that you would associate with this. This is like a poster though. This is different. This is not how the show appears when you're watching it. Like that. There it is again. You get good dynamic range in terms of the colors, but it's more of like this flat tone, which I associate more when you're watching a movie, like a serious drama movie. Now, when we look at Rings of Power, I think this is also like poster. This is poster, so that's not doing it. This is a scene, and when I look at this, I think this is shot in 30 frames per second rather than 24. And automatically, I don't know if you guys see it, but like it, when I look at this image, it comes off already like live, like a home video, or like, yeah, like a live series. Like it looks too, for sure there's vibrancy already, and like there's like it pops up a little bit more. Some people might like that, but when you look at the original Lord of the Rings, I think the way this movie looked, you know, you got that flat, more of a, the color grading is more like this. It's more flat. There's other scenes here that we could look at. It had more of a serious tone when I was watching this show. Except for, oh well, even when they had Smeagol on screen, there, see, it's more like that flat dynamic range kind of image, right? But Rings of Power, it just, this is another one too. Maybe, yeah, this is a screenshot that's been sharpened, but it doesn't give off like this. I don't even know if the word I'm looking for is realistic, but it doesn't seem like it's parallel with the same world of Lord of the Rings. And you know, I've had conversations with people who are fans of this show, and they think I'm being too picky, or like I'm looking at certain things like costume design, like having extra details on costumes just to give off like an extra feeling of whatever their race is. Like if they were elves, there was like little stars on their armor, or these Harfoots. Where's that Harfoot image? Where every one of them has to have some sort of weeds coming out of their hair because they're Harfoots. I just think the way the show comes off is they're trying too hard to make it to be like in your face. Hey, look, this is who I am. This is what I do. Therefore, I'm gonna have this stuff in my hair. Like there was this one clip from the most recent episode where every one of them had like hay coming out of their hair. Like I can see why some people might have it if it's like decor or something like that, or if it's the styling that they would have for you know, being in this. But like, I can see maybe when a female character wants to have something like a flower or some accent, but this guy's just got straight up like twigs coming out of his hair. Does he need it? No, I don't think he needs the I think it's their dad. They don't need that. There's no like function to it besides, hey, look, I'm a Harfoot. This is why I have it in my hair. You know, like, here's the king of the elves, and I don't think we're made to be a fan of this guy, the way they write him, or like even maybe the actor. But I don't know. I don't believe it. Elrond, I took him seriously, you know? Any of the kings in Lord of the Rings, even the bad ones, you know, the one on Minas Tirith, or like the Rohan King and all that. I'm like, you look at them the way they came off as soon as they were introduced, and you take him seriously. This guy, when he came on screen, I was like, who's this guy? Like, am I supposed to believe this guy's the king? And he kind of flaunts around. But yeah, I think casting, maybe the casting is okay image wise, but they didn't sell it to me in terms of the acting. And you know, there's this whole argument like, oh, people are just bashing on it because it's woke, right? It's written like it's supposed to be politically correct for today's times. I don't care about the race or the skin color of these. I guess you would call them race, like the Harfoots or hobbits, or the dwarves, the race of the dwarves, or the race of the elves. Black, white, Hispanic, brown, Asian, whatever. That's fine. I have no issue with putting on like a international kind of a race to these made up races from the writing. It's just the way they did it was so in your face, like that was why they did it. Like all the media press pushing that they was supposed to be like whatever, like the first female dwarf on screen, or if it was going to be not even just a female, but it was like a person of color. And it's like, if that's your selling point, so it could be more relevant to people watching it, then was that your focus of the show? Is not actually to tell a good story or to like sell like a well acted piece of writing, you know? She's I think she would have been fine. I think she's a strong actress on her own, but the way they overwrote her, like the way whenever she's on screen and she's like the loud kind of boisterous joyful you know, partner to Durin, great. That's fine. But I just think like the acting was so forced. And I'm gonna go with it, you know, our star power here, Galadriel. Okay, this scene, I remember when I watched this the first time, and they showed this scene of this you know, riding horses across this island. It was fine. I'm like, okay, great. I like the cinematics. It is good set design for the most part. I believed it. No, this is something else. But then they showed this in super slow motion. Whereas we've never seen her smile the entire series. We've not seen her smile, and this is the first time we get to see it. And it's in super slow motion, up close and personal. Yeah, I guess I'd believe that like she's like super joyful when she was riding in the scene, that she was super happy. Didn't really follow the rest of the way she was written in the end of the whole series. Like, okay, so she finally gets to ride a horse off to some like, you know, scripture place where she was gonna do some like information or whatever, look up some stuff. But like to be this, I don't know, joyful when riding a horse, you didn't see that at all from the whole show, and it just felt like it was so disconnected from her. And as I was saying too, like when your main character is somebody you can't root for, you know, a lot of people have said it, like, she is not likable. She is not a likable character. I think acting wise too, she's fine. I'm not gonna say like she overacts like some of the other characters in the show. I can believe that she's acting her role well. It's just that her role wasn't written well. Like, it's forcing her to do too much when she doesn't have to. Like, she doesn't have to be that, like, pissed off all the time, and she doesn't have to be like always like, hey, look, I can take care of myself. I'm, again, like, the underlying thing about her is that no one will help her. She is like a lone wolf, and she's gonna do everything herself because she's a powerful woman. And that's like, yeah, Galadriel. It, I want to like her. Like, it's not even too about anything about like aesthetics. I think she's attractive looking too. Like, she could be a very like powerful leading lady role. I do think she's like, in some aspects she could be even better looking than Kate Blanchett. Is that her name? You know, the comparison here. But you know, I'm watching this show because I'm such a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. So if you're gonna call on the same character names as Lord of the Rings, then you'd want some sort of like similarity between the roles, or at least between the characters, if it's the same character. That's why I think House of the Dragon, less of that expectation, because we don't know any of these people. We don't know anything about, like, you know, we've not developed any relationship with them already in the previous Game of Thrones and all that stuff. So it's cool. Whatever we're fed with, it's like, well, this is who they are, this is what we'll believe. But when you come in with Elrond, Galadriel, and then like this new kind of Gandalf, and we're in our minds we've already developed like this like attachment, like connection with these characters from the previous movies. I think you should definitely focus on the fact that those have already been developed and like nurtured as fans, and then like use that like it could have been so much better. Like, all the hate, yeah, all this woke hate, whatever, I understand why there is that part of the population that will just automatically bash it because it's so blatant. Like, the underlying purpose of this show was to push political agenda, or like the face of, you know, today's world. We need to see the face of today's world in this show. No, we don't. It's a fairy tale. It's a fantasy. Like, we're not trying to emulate today's world in a fantasy world. But if you want to do it with just like choice of actors and actresses, fine, do that. It's fine. I'm okay with that. But when it's like the underlying message, it's too much. Every episode, I either I fall asleep partially because I lose interest and I have to rewatch it again because I'm trying to like it. I'm trying to give it a fair chance. It's not like, oh, first episode sucked. I remember when I watched the first episode, and we were just kind of like bashing it as we were watching through it, and we just kept kind of laughing at a lot of the decisions that were made from the show. And at the end of the show, I was like, I don't know if I can watch the second one, or if I can continue watching it. But, you know, I guess with like most of our circle of friends, I think the majority of my close circle of friends are watching this. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to be in the know, so I'll keep watching it. So I've been watching it weekly. And I guess the only person who I've kind of developed a like rooting for emotion would be Elrond. And it's small too. It's not like, I think, yeah, it's what he stands for. We believe that's why we've already understood that Elrond was like by the book, follows the rules, super responsible, and so I can see how the young Elrond of this show is matching that. Let's do Elrond. This guy, another decision too is like all the hair, like how I understood maybe why like some of the forest elves or like the river elves had dark hair, but they were all still long and they followed. Look at this. That's great, you know? But no, it's fine. It's fine. You're gonna choose to have this guy look this way. It's okay. But I do think there's still that disconnect from the Elrond that we already identified and grew to respect from the first Lord of the Rings. But I find myself rooting for him because he's still like, all right, so he honors his friends, he honors his word. He's like, he's upholding the true, like he's a real good guy. So it's like, okay, you can easily root for that. That's why I like this guy. I was rooting for Durin because he was just like a conflicted friend, and like I get it, misunderstanding between him and Elrond. But then the last episode, I don't know if you guys saw it, and Durin made a comment about a table. If you guys saw it, you understand what I'm saying. But like, they wrote in this part where he references like a sacrilegious thing about the kind of material this table's made, and so it forces the king of the elves. Okay, I don't even know that guy's name. This guy on the left. It forces him to like offer it back in return to be brought back to his people so that they would be able to use it rightfully. And then you later find out in the episode that Durin was lying and he was just cracking a joke so that he can get a new table for his wife. What was that about? Like, what? Here I'm like slowly building respect and like a liking and a support for Durin, the elf guy. Here, let's look it up. Durin. This guy. We're supposed to like him more than Gimli. He is a more likable dwarf than Gimli. It's not a dwarf thing to do. Is it a dwarf thing to do? I don't think so, man. Like he referenced like some serious underlying like messages behind it when he was doing it at the table. Like it was like such an official table with the king, and you're just gonna I don't know. I feel like you're saying that, and it's like you're just defending it because that's the way they wrote it. But they didn't even have to write it that way. It served no purpose. It served no purpose. It didn't follow him. Elves and dwarves are meant to be opposite. Sure. That's fine. And you see that already in the way they carry themselves. But in terms of like this mutual respect thing, and also Durin's like, obviously you could tell Durin still respects Elrond. I just found like the writing just didn't make sense. That was another part of the writing. I was like, why did they do that? And I don't think I'm being picky about it, but like it pulls on certain like emotional strings as a viewer, and you're like you're left to question, okay, do I like Durin? Like do I still respect the guy the same way that I did before? And like that whole scene too where she starts to lie to Elrond to cover for Durin. We were first to understand that Durin and Elrond had like a bad friendship that kind of like went astray, and she was the only reason why they were able to nurture it back together. So then we're a fan of hers. And then we've already developed like this connection with Elrond being, he's not gonna break his word, he's not gonna like betray anyone. And then we're forced to watch the scene where she's trying to lie to Elrond. Elrond's like making these claims about like, where is he? Like he didn't bring his stuff, and then she's covering for him. And now there's like deceit being involved when they just re-nurtured their friendship. Again, I was like, why did they write it this way? Durin's a joker. Sure. I mean, he could be a joker. That's fine. That's fine. Like Gimli was supposed to be comedic relief too, but the guy still had like values, and like, when it came to like actual things of like values and like virtues of a person, like a good person, they still carried those things. It's one of the reasons why I didn't like the main dwarf from The Hobbit. I forget that guy's name. Wasn't it like Durin too? I don't know. Because you couldn't find yourself rooting for his virtues and his like his values and his virtues, because he was constantly being tempted by the Arkenstone, or like his vengeance. He wanted revenge all the time, and then you just couldn't like him. And that was one of the reasons why I couldn't even root for him in the final battle where he faces that white orc. Because like I don't even like this guy, but why am I supposed to root for him at this point? And also, you know, they're, the way they kind of carried themselves throughout the whole movie wasn't very like athletic or agile or whatever like that is, or like feats of strength or whatever. And all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe he's like standing up to this, you know, badass white orc. Anyway, that's the Hobbit. That's something else too. So it's just the way things are written to lead us to a certain direction in how we start to appreciate character development. But then they like inconsistencies in that writing cause us to question our own opinions about a character. I understand when that's on purpose. I understand when that's written on purpose, when it's like you bring someone to lead someone to liking someone. For example, Game of Thrones, Khaleesi, we're like brought to like her and then love her and then root for her, and then we want her to succeed, and she wants to do everything, you know, like she's even taking her dragons to fight the White Walkers and all that stuff, and then she goes nuts in the last episode. I don't think I understand why that might have been like intentional, but like it's bad writing. Like it didn't make sense as much as, let's say, when we were you know, when we were introduced to like Cersei or Jaime Lannister, and then we get slowly more introduced to just how dark or like how evil they are, with like some really like twisted thing that will show us a part of their character that we didn't see. That's like intentional writing. It's like it's supposed to create this twist of like, oh, we think they're good and now they're evil. That happened many times in Game of Thrones, and it was great. It was I think implemented really well. But in this show, I don't think any of it's intentional. I feel like they're writing it, I don't know, it feels aimless. Now let's go to where's that guy? This guy. The person of color elf, the elf of color. I'm fine with that too. I think he's a good actor, actually. I think the way he's selling his character is fine. I just don't think they wrote him well either. Like the lines, the try hard lines, where it seems overly poetic, or it's overly like, it sounds like, if you guys have watched Spartacus, some of the ways they speak in Spartacus, Blood and Sand, or, you know, like gratitude, or like just to say thank you. They always say gratitude, you know? It's like forced. It feels like, did they have to do that every time? Maybe it's the way that they say thank you, whatever. But there's like just some certain choices they do when they implement these characters in Rings of Power. The guy's like trudging through some tunnel, or he's like he's taken in as a prisoner with the orcs, and he's like bleeding and stuff like that. And I know that there's certain ways you do with makeup and stage makeup that's still supposed to be aesthetic but believable, like they you know, that they are like getting dirty and like beaten up and bloodied up. But when you see HD, when you're watching the show, like it's almost like you can see the makeup on the characters, the way the fabrics kind of like rest on the actors themselves too. It's too polished to be believable, or it's just not done in a way that I thought was executed the same way as Lord of the Rings. Take, for example, there was one scene, Galadriel, forest. I mean, she was standing. Yeah. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it exactly, but here is a great scene. You know, where, I don't know, they're talking about like their old friendship, and I remember her cloak. It was a small detail, again, from, I'm just paying attention to it visually, but a small detail where she's standing and there was just the perfect amount of leaves that were on her cloak, that were on the ground, that was done so as if it was like being made for a poster. You know, details like that I'll pick up on, because I mean, that's the kind of stuff I look at. I'm a visual person, so I pay attention to like certain visual decisions they make. And I was like, they didn't need to do that. They didn't have to like put so much effort into putting extra leaves that will just stay on her cloak as she walks. Whereas like when we saw, that's not the, you know, this Galadriel in all these scenes, yeah, still perfect the way it's laid out on the stair or whatever she's standing, whatever. I understand those are all deliberate decisions too, but it's like within a reasonable amount of like execution that you'd be like, okay, well that's believable. I don't know, I can't find any other images of her. You know, like, let's go back to that one. You, I'll believe it. But yeah, that scene, I don't know if you guys want to go back to it at some point. This scene where she's like, it's all yellow leaves and stuff like that. They do like this top view of them. She's standing. I think it happened with Elrond too, where he's standing next to the big tree and he's like looking off into the distance, and then they just place these extra leaves on his cloak because we're supposed to believe he is a forest elf and like of this specific forest themed city. They just didn't have to try so hard. Like they're trying too hard. It's too much in your face. This is another part of that scene too, where she's walking away and there's just the perfect amount of leaves. This is what I mean by set design. I think when I told my friends this, I'm like, I'm not a fan of the set design. Don't get me wrong, stunning sets. The way they've designed everything to look very aesthetic. There's another one, aesthetic in this. Here, let's see. Let's do Rings of Power Vistas. This will show. Okay. You know, this gives me a very like Naruto, Hashirama, or Madara kind of thing. Looks good there. That looks great too. It's fine. You know, we're every scene that we're supposed to look at, I get it, is supposed to give off this sense of like, ooh, wonder and amazement, and that's fine. I have no problems with that. I'm trying to find this one where I think it was like there's another one of this city. And I think, yeah, maybe it is a vibrance thing or a sharpness thing or like a clarity thing where it's too punchy for me to take it like, oh, it's real. You know, it's maybe almost like they made it too high definition, where it's not that I don't appreciate it, but I can't take it seriously because it's too staged. When something is too staged, like having extra leaves on the cloak or something like that, or like, here's a great example of this armor. Well, let's put some little like snowflakes on it so that we'll believe that it's armor meant for cold. You know, and she's hanging out. They were ice climbing with just their armor and daggers. You know, sure. I just wait. The execution. Oh man, oh my gosh, like I couldn't believe this scene either. Like I feel like they could have done this better too. Look how bright it is. It's supposed to be in the ocean, and I think moonlight was the only thing, or I don't know what it was as their source of light, but it's just the way the show comes off is it's just too bright. And I think I've grown to associate the sense of like this dark, dim lighting kind of more of a flat grain, flat kind of color grading. That this seems like another universe. Like it's like I can't take it with the same kind of level of appreciation and respect. This is how the way this picture looks is how this show appears too when you're watching the actual show. I get it. You want it to be well lit so you can see everyone and identify everyone, but you don't need to. You don't need to identify these people. It's like it's supposed to be at night, dark. You're only supposed to have like fire as your light. Oh gosh, it's so annoying. I wanted to show you the one vista by the dwarf. I remember they showed a background, and mean, okay. Oh yeah, nothing too. Armor for like their beards or whatever. Ugh. Even the use of like maybe depth of field, but how bright it is under there. How bright it is under there. It's anyway. Maybe I'm just not a fan of bright in fantasy worlds. I'm trying to find this one vista. Basically, I know. I'll do this. Waterfalls. It's not this one. This scene was also another one I was like, okay, we're supposed to take into, you know, wonderment and amazement. Okay, well, there's a helicopter right there. I don't know why. Maybe this isn't part of that scene, but this one is definitely Rings of Power. And when I saw it, I was like, they didn't need to put like a mini waterfall on every single crevice of this mountain. Like, they didn't need to do that for us to appreciate it. It's just too... It's almost like it's too much. They give me too much to try and appreciate, where it's like, okay, well, I can't believe it anymore. Like, water's supposed to follow its easiest path, right? We all know that. When waterfall... I guess I'm assuming we all supposed to know that, but when water comes down, it's lazy. It always follows the easiest path. So why, in this rock face of a mountain, are there 50 paths for water to take? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's supposed to take the easiest path, but there's like 50 paths. I couldn't take it seriously, and in that sense, where I'm supposed to look at this and be like impressed, and be like, wow, that looks amazing. I look at it and I critique it, and it's like, oh, I feel like they did too much. Everything's too much. The way, like, oh, that's another thing too with this show. Close-ups to the face. They do a lot of close-ups to the face so that we can, I don't know, maybe appreciate the level of expression that's on their faces when they're acting, when they're saying all these shitty lines. Oh, man. It's just, it's disappointing. Oh, yeah, this scene too, where he's like yelling, he's fighting this orc and he's yelling for someone because he's almost about to die. He's kind of crying. I get that it's like a callback to like a similar kind of scene where like Isildur was fighting Sauron's army and stuff like that with this whole battle. But it was just too dramatic for me. I'm being super picky about the way this show comes off and appears, and that's just the way I'm taking it. These are all my own personal opinions. You don't have to agree, disagree. If you have anything you want to say in response to some of the things I'm saying, please feel free to comment down below, and, you know, share some of your insights or your opinions if they counter or if they align with mine. I didn't want to like be here and like look over specific clips to the show. I don't want any first, like, you know, copyright terms of service or anything like that, but you know, you can look it up in YouTube, or if you're gonna watch it in whatever subscription service you have, maybe you'll pay a little bit more attention now into how I think the way they do set design it's just too much. It's in your face. And there's something about the costumes that I'm supposed to really like their costumes. And some of the costumes I do appreciate. I think armor's done really, for the most part, not the little snowflake things on the chainmail, but I do like the armor in Rings of Power. I think it looks fine and believable. It's the other like aesthetic things that they do. Maybe it just looks, you know, for a raggedy cloak or whatever like that, it still just comes off a little too clean. The stains on any of the clothing in Rings of Power, if you're watching it, you would see the Harfoots are the only ones who ever really have real stains on their stuff. Okay, so maybe the orcs might have some deliberate stains and stuff like that, but like, you know, I guess you can appreciate this if you really wanted to, but I just, it doesn't look as realistic as even how Lord of the Rings looked years ago when they did the movie. But the budget's supposed to be, you know, pretty big. You'd figure too, with the way they shot this, that they'd have access to a lot more of this, the you know, the the costumes that they've already created from before, that it wouldn't be that hard to emulate the look. But it's like they kind of took it in a direction. And that's the thing too, all these like goblin orcs, none of these like massive big orcs that we haven't, well, at least we haven't seen yet. We're just seeing a lot of goblin. Okay, no, this is something else. I don't think I've seen this yet. They look like Urukai. But these are the goblins in Lord of the Rings. Goblins in Lord of the Rings. Love it. Like, that's sick. I guess maybe it's like, because it's the frame rate's lower, like a 24 frame rate versus 30 frame rate. You don't actually get to see sharp detail in like motion as well. And in a way, I think that adds to the aesthetic appeal of the way it was shot. It's more cinematic this way. But with the new show, 30 frames, and the way they just, that's the old one still. The way it's shot, like how everything, you can see like, okay, snake skin kind of a thing, or alligator skin cloak, but all the detail of this, of the costume and the way they shoot Rings of Power, you can kind of see that it's a costume. It's less believable. And yeah, you could tell this scene for sure, like everything was deliberately placed in terms of their cloaks. Super long cloaks, and even the way it sits over like that. Yeah, it looks great. Everything's like picturesque, but I don't know. I think I've beaten this to the ground already. Enough for tonight anyway. Let me know what you guys think. As you can see, I have a lot of opinions just speaking on this by myself. The writing's bad, in my opinion. Okay, like the acting, I don't have any issues per se with the actual actors and actresses themselves, but I think just the way it's been being directed and the ways they're supposed to attack this writing doesn't make it any better, unfortunately. Galadriel, she could ease off a little bit and we would still believe her, you know? Maybe some more, I don't know, we're made to hate her. I don't know if they want us to hate her, but if she's like the main focus of every episode, why are you making us hate her? Oh man, don't tell me Sauron's gonna look like that, because it looks too. Ugh. Yeah, this thing. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I didn't want to make this too long today. It's about almost 45 minutes long. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you're a fan of Rings of Power, if you're a fan of the House of the Dragon. I think too, with going back to House of the Dragon, we understand how far they've taken certain things in Game of Thrones. Like the shock value of certain things, like, you know, incest and like assault and, you know, worse things. And I do like the way that they're not just throwing that in our face because they can. House of the Dragon is still trying to go about things a little bit more subtle, not so in your face. Bam! Look, we're Game of Thrones. This is the brand. We're Game of Thrones brand. Look, this is our Game of Thrones brand. I like that. I like that they're still trying to give it some sense of like realism, mystery, subtlety, where we can like take it for what it is, rather than having to show us so deliberately, like Rings of Power does. Or Rings of Power repeats things a lot too, like some certain message or some sort of objective. They'll keep repeating it as if like we don't already know that as a viewer. It kind of nurtures too a younger audience, maybe. Like maybe that's why like they're writing Rings of Power to be more accepted by a younger audience who may be less attentive than the older audience like myself. Whereas the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon, they're not trying that. It's almost like, okay, if you can't keep up, then it's not meant for you. You know, if you're not like keeping up, and I don't think that the show is relatively hard to keep up with. Like as in any show, when you're starting to watch something, the names are of like a new string of characters is always hard to keep up with. But I've, I might not even know all the names off the top of my head, but if I'm watching this, if I'm watching the show and someone's making a reference to someone else, I'll hear the name and I'll know who they're talking about. I don't necessarily have to remember the name myself, but I'll know who they're referring to. Like, that's done really well. Rather in Rings of Power, it's like basically like a big sign in your face. Look, this is what we're saying. Look, this is who we're referring to. Look, this is the theme. I can't bring myself to be like rooting for Isildur. Isildur's friends on the boat were supposed to take it like this, big thing on a ship of this, but really they're always tying the same piece of rope around this like this peg of wood that like releases or not. I don't know. I just can't take it seriously. And like the boat looks like it's always dry in the boat. I don't know if you guys noticed that too, but like it doesn't look like this boat's actually in a rough water or rough sea. Everything's always like perfect, like afternoon light, yellow sun and whatever. Anyway, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Thanks for watching, guys. This week, I hope you enjoyed me like rant about this show, or the two shows anyway. I'm excited to watch the next episode of House of the Dragon on Sunday, I think. Rings of Power, I'm not excited, but I guess I've invested enough where I still want to see what's gonna happen. I just want something to come out of it. I'm hoping that with all this time and investment into the show that I'll be rewarded at some point while watching it. So, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video or this podcast, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know when the next one comes out. Hit the like button. It'll help me out too. And yeah, if you have any kind of suggestions as to what you want to hear about on this podcast, we're always open up for suggestions or ideas for the pod. Yeah, nothing else. We'll see you next week, Thursday, 11 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for watching, guys. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Have a good night.